In the sprawling suburb of Oakwood, the local Walmart wasn't just a shopping destination, it was a beacon in the community, a place where locals met, shopped, and worked. However, beneath the surface of daily bargains and friendly chatter, dark rumors circulated. Employees whispered of unexplained occurrences after hours, of aisles that rearranged themselves, and of a chilling presence that seemed to stalk the store's vast, linoleum-floored expanse during the graveyard shift. Sarah, a recent college graduate, took a job at this Walmart as a night manager to save up for grad school. It was her responsibility to oversee the stocking team and ensure the store was ready for the bustling business of the following day. On her first night, she noticed how the atmosphere of the store shifted once the sun set. The bright fluorescent lights that filled the store with harsh, white light also cast deep, menacing shadows in the less frequented corners of the vast building. The friendly chatter of daytime was replaced by a deep, unnerving silence, broken only by the occasional crash of a box being dropped or the distant hum of the refrigerators. One of Sarah's duties was to perform a final walkthrough of the store at the end of each shift. This task, typically routine, became a source of dread. She started noticing that items from the toy section seemed to move inexplicably. A doll placed firmly on a high shelf at closing would be found in the middle of an aisle in the morning. Initially, she rationalized it as the work of forgetful employees or perhaps her own tired mind playing tricks on her. As the weeks passed, the disturbances grew more frequent and more intense. The toy section was often in complete disarray, with boxes opened and contents scattered. One night, as Sarah reviewed security footage to catch the culprit, she froze in horror. The video revealed the silhouette of a small child, skipping down the toy aisle at exactly 3:07 a.m., stopping to pick up toys, and then disappearing from the frame as abruptly as it had appeared. The timestamp indicated that this had occurred just minutes after Sarah had last walked through that aisle. There was no other entry or exit caught on camera. Shaken, Sarah decided to confide in her colleague, Tom, a longtime security guard who had worked at the store for over a decade. Tom listened intently, his face growing pale as Sarah described what she had seen. After a moment of silence, he leaned in close and whispered that Sarah wasn't the first to notice strange happenings in the store. He recounted stories from other employees, some of whom had left the job because of their experiences. Toys were not the only anomalies. There were also reports of ghostly whispers in the clothing section, cold breezes sweeping through the locked and sealed grocery area, and shadows flitting through the back warehouse, where no living person was supposed to be. Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah and Tom decided to conduct their own investigation after the store closed one night. They equipped themselves with flashlights and a digital recorder to capture any auditory phenomena. Starting at midnight, they patrolled the aisles, focusing on the spots where the most activity had been reported. Their first stop was the toy aisle. As they approached, the temperature dropped noticeably, their breath visible in the air despite the indoor setting. Sarah felt a tug at her jacket, but when she turned, there was nothing but the empty aisle behind her. Tom, who was a few steps ahead, swore he heard laughter, a child's laughter, light and mocking. It seemed to come from all directions, bouncing off the shelves in a disorienting echo. Next, they moved to the clothing section. Here, the hangers clattered as if caught in a gust of wind, though there was no air circulation that could explain it. Tom raised the digital recorder, asking aloud if anyone was there with them. The only answer was the sudden, intense static that erupted from the recorder, causing both to wince at the harsh sound. Hours passed as they continued their exploration, each section of the store revealing new horrors. In the grocery area, despite the locked coolers, they found a trail of wet footprints, as if someone had walked through the aisles dripping with water. These inexplicable phenomena culminated in the back warehouse, where the shadows seemed thickest. Here, they felt a palpable sense of dread, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. As they turned the corner past rows of high shelves stocked with overstock, both flashlights flickered and went out simultaneously, plunging them into darkness. A low whisper filled the space, the words indistinct but unmistakably human. Sarah reached out to find Tom's hand, but instead, her fingers brushed against something cold, something that felt like another hand, small and delicate, like that of a child. Her breath caught in her throat as the faint light from the emergency exit signs illuminated the warehouse just enough to reveal the outline of a small figure, standing just a few feet away, staring at them. The figure was indistinct, its edges blurred as if made of mist, but its eyes, unnervingly clear, locked onto Sarah with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. Tom, grasping for his flashlight, finally managed to click it back on, but the light pierced through the figure, illuminating only the racks behind it. The childlike apparition had vanished. Heart-pounding, Sarah suggested they review the digital recorder to see if they had captured any voices. Rewinding to the moment of their encounter, they played back the audio. Amid the static, a faint voice could be heard, its tone melancholic and eerie. "Find me," it said, followed by a soft sobbing that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. Determined to get to the bottom of these occurrences, Sarah and Tom decided to dig deeper into the history of the land on which the Walmart was built. Their research at the local library turned up disturbing revelations. The site had once been home to an old orphanage that burned down under mysterious circumstances in the late 1800s. Many children perished in the fire, their remains never recovered. The orphanage was eventually forgotten, and over the decades, the tragedy that occurred there faded from public memory. The more they learned, the more the pieces began to fit together. The sightings, the sounds, and the childlike apparitions seemed to be linked to the tragic past of the orphanage. Sarah theorized that the spirit of one of the orphaned children might be reaching out, trapped in a liminal space between worlds, perhaps unable to move on due to the trauma of the past. With this new understanding, Sarah and Tom felt a renewed sense of purpose. They believed that if they could somehow help the child spirit find peace, the disturbances might cease. They decided to conduct a more formal investigation and possibly a ritual to help the spirit move on. They reached out to a local paranormal investigation team known for their sensitive and ethical approach to dealing with haunted locations. The team arrived equipped with more advanced equipment, including EMF meters, thermal cameras, and a medium who specialized in communicating with spirits. As night fell, the team set up their equipment in the key areas where Sarah and Tom had experienced the most activity. The medium, Ms. Avery, began to walk through the aisles, her hands outstretched, her face concentrated as she tried to sense the presence of the spirit. As they approached the toy section, Ms. Avery suddenly stopped, her body rigid. "There's a lot of sadness here," she whispered. "This child, he's so lost, so confused." Her voice trembled as she spoke, conveying the depth of the child's despair. The EMF meters spiked, and the thermal camera showed a sudden drop in temperature around her. Ms. Avery sat down in the middle of the aisle, the team forming a protective circle around her. She began to speak gently into the air, addressing the unseen child with words of comfort and reassurance. "We know you're here, and we know you're scared. We want to help you find your way home." The store fell eerily silent, the usual creaks and groans of the building seeming to pause as if in anticipation. Then, the toys began to move on their own. Balls rolled slowly out from their shelves, a toy car drove in a tight circle, and a stuffed bear raised its arm. Each movement was deliberate, controlled, as if the child were playing a silent game with them. Ms. Avery continued to speak softly, urging the spirit to let go of the world of the living and to move towards the light that would take him to peace. The atmosphere began to change, the air growing warmer, the oppressive sense of sadness lifting slightly. Just as it seemed the ritual was reaching a climax, a sudden loud crash echoed through the store from the direction of the back warehouse. The team jumped, their attention snapping towards the sound. The cameras and lights were immediately directed to the source of the disturbance. As they hurried towards the warehouse, Sarah felt a tugging sensation at her heart, a mix of fear and hope battling within her. They reached the warehouse to find a section of shelving had collapsed, cans and boxes strewn across the floor. But among the chaos, there was something else, a faint glow emanating from beneath the rubble. As they cleared the debris, they uncovered an old, charred sign that had been hidden beneath the shelving units. The paint was mostly peeled off, but the words Oakwood Orphanage were still legible on the scorched wood. The revelation hit them all with the weight of history, the tragic past of the site making its presence felt even in the modern edifice of the Walmart. As they stood there, contemplating the sign, a soft giggle echoed through the warehouse, chilling and yet somehow no longer menacing. It seemed the spirit was acknowledging their discovery, a sign of recognition from the unseen presence that had so deeply affected their lives. As the echo of the giggle faded into the vast, shadowy reaches of the warehouse, Ms. Avery spoke up, her voice cutting through the tense air. "He's been waiting so long for someone to acknowledge his pain, to remember them, to remember this place." The team, surrounded by the remnants of the past, felt a collective chill run through them as the weight of her words settled in. It was not just one child's spirit that haunted the aisles of Walmart, but possibly the lost souls of many children, each clinging to the remnants of a forgotten tragedy. Determined to bring peace to these restless spirits, Sarah suggested they hold a vigil to honor the memory of the children who perished in the orphanage fire. The local community was invited, and the vigil was set up in the parking lot of the Walmart, with candles, photographs of the old orphanage that they could find, and an array of flowers and toys. The night of the vigil was eerily calm, with a gentle breeze whispering through the assembled crowd as people from all over Oakwood gathered, drawn by the story of the forgotten tragedy and the recent strange occurrences. As candles were lit and the medium began to recite a prayer for the lost souls, a palpable sense of anticipation filled the air. Partway through the vigil, a soft, almost imperceptible humming began to resonate around the crowd. The candles flickered as if in response to the humming, and a light mist began to form, swirling around the photographs and candles. The temperature dropped sharply, and the attendees huddled closer, their breath visible in the chilling air. Ms. Avery, her voice steady but filled with emotion, called out to the spirits of the children, inviting them to join the vigil and accept the community's acknowledgement and remembrance. "We gather here to offer you peace," she intoned, "to remember your lives and provide the solace you have been denied for so long." As she spoke, the toys that had been placed among the flowers began to move. A small, stuffed dog wagged its tail, a tiny plastic soldier raised its arm in salute, and a ragged doll blinked its glassy eyes. The crowd gasped, some in fear, others in wonder, as the supernatural phenomena unfolded before them. But then, the ground beneath them began to tremble subtly, as if the earth itself was responding to the deep, unresolved sorrow of the past. The humming grew louder, more insistent, and the mist thickened, enveloping everyone in a soft, cold blanket. The medium raised her arms, her voice rising over the hum, "Spirits of the orphanage, hear our plea. Move beyond this world, find peace in the light." Suddenly, the air snapped with electricity, and a bright orb of light appeared above the vigil, casting a gentle, serene glow over the crowd. Faces turned upwards, eyes wide in awe as the orb pulsed with a warm, inviting light. The humming ceased, and the mist began to dissipate, revealing the first clear night sky seen in weeks. The vigil continued into the early hours of the morning, the community united in a shared purpose. As dawn approached, the orb slowly faded, and a sense of peace settled over the parking lot. The attendees began to disperse, speaking in hushed tones about the night's incredible events, the healing they felt, and the hope that the spirits had found their way to peace. However, as the Walmart employees, including Sarah and Tom, returned to the store to resume their duties, an unspoken question hung in the air. Had they truly resolved the haunting? The store seemed quieter, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, but the history of the land on which it stood was long and complicated. Weeks passed without incident, and life at the Walmart returned to some semblance of normalcy. Yet, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something remained unresolved. The vigil had been powerful, a significant step toward healing, but was it enough to appease decades, perhaps centuries, of unrest? Her question was answered one night as she closed up the store. As she walked through the toy aisle, out of the corner of her eye, she saw a flicker of movement. Turning, she expected to see nothing, hoping her mind was playing tricks on her. But there, at the end of the aisle, the ghostly image of a small child stood watching her, its expression one of solemnity and perhaps a lingering need. The child's apparition slowly faded, leaving Sarah in the silent, empty aisle. The message was clear: there was more to be done, more secrets to uncover, more healing required. As she stood there, a resolve settled over her. The story of the Oakwood Walmart, built on the ashes of the old orphanage, was far from over. The journey to uncover the full truth of the land, to bring final peace to all restless spirits entangled with its history, was just beginning. The next day, Sarah started delving deeper into the archives, pulling up old land deeds, newspaper clippings from the time of the orphanage, and any historical records that mentioned the area. Each document seemed to add another layer to the complex tapestry of Oakwood's hidden past. Among the brittle pages and faded texts, she discovered references to older structures and even some local legends that hinted at ancient curses and long-forgotten graveyards that might have been disturbed during the building's construction. Fueled by a mix of dread and determination, Sarah arranged meetings with local historians and paranormal experts. Each conversation opened new avenues of inquiry. It became clear that to truly understand the haunting, she would have to explore not just the orphanage's history but also deeper into the pre-colonial history of the land itself. One chilly evening, as Sarah was organizing her notes, Tom approached her with a concerned look. He had been doing some research of his own, talking to the older residents of Oakwood, some of whom had lived there their whole lives. From them, he learned about an old legend, seldom spoken of, about a watcher of the woods, a spirit guardian that was said to protect sacred grounds. According to local lore, if these grounds were ever desecrated, the watcher would awaken to reclaim them. Tom's revelation gave Sarah pause. The implications were chilling. The Walmart might not only be haunted by the spirits of the children from the orphanage but also by something older, more powerful. They needed to find out where these sacred grounds were exactly located and if the Walmart had indeed been built over them. Their investigation took on a new urgency. Sarah and Tom spent nights poring over old maps and records, trying to pinpoint the exact locations mentioned in the legends. They interviewed tribal elders from the local indigenous community, who spoke of a time when their ancestors would perform rituals to appease the watcher and keep the peace in the land. Armed with this new information, Sarah proposed an audacious plan. They would perform a ritual, one that combined the old ways of the indigenous people with the remembrance they had already conducted for the orphanage children. She hoped that by honoring all the spirits tied to the land, they might finally bring peace to the area and end the hauntings. With the help of the indigenous elders and the local community, they prepared for the ritual. It was to be held on the next full moon, a time believed to be powerful for such ceremonies. The preparation involved collecting sacred objects, learning the correct chants, and, most importantly, making peace offerings to the watcher. As the full moon approached, the atmosphere around the Walmart grew tenser. Employees reported seeing shadows moving just at the edge of their vision, hearing whispers in empty aisles, and feeling sudden drops in temperature. The activity seemed to intensify as if the spirits were aware of the upcoming ritual and were reacting to it. On the night of the ritual, the community gathered in the parking lot, much like they had for the vigil. But this time, the area was arranged in a circle with the sacred objects at the center. The elders led the ceremony, guiding Sarah, Tom, and the others through each step. As they chanted, the wind picked up, swirling around them, lifting leaves and debris in a dance around the circle. Halfway through the ritual, a profound silence fell over the crowd. It was as if the very air was waiting, holding its breath. Then, a low rumble started beneath their feet, growing louder, more insistent. The ground vibrated, and several people stumbled, trying to keep their balance. Sarah, standing at the center of the circle, felt a sudden warmth envelop her, a stark contrast to the cold wind. She looked up to see a figure materializing in front of her. It was taller, more imposing than the childlike apparitions they had seen before. Its eyes, glowing faintly in the moonlight, held a wisdom and a sadness that was palpable. The figure, which she believed to be the Watcher, raised its arms, and the wind ceased abruptly, the silence deepening. It spoke then, not with words but directly into their minds, a voice ancient and resonant that filled Sarah with an overwhelming sense of awe and fear. "You have disturbed the sacred, but you seek to mend," the voice said, its tone neither accusing nor forgiving. "The balance must be restored, the land must be healed." As it spoke, the figure's form began to fade, dissolving into the night air, leaving behind a palpable sense of expectation. The ritual continued, with the community now more united in their purpose, their chants more fervent. As the ceremony concluded, the air felt lighter, the oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the Walmart seemed to lift. The participants felt a mix of relief and exhaustion, their faces lit by the soft glow of the remaining candles as they quietly contemplated the significance of what had just occurred. The ground beneath them felt stable again, no longer vibrating with the restless energy of the disturbed. The night air, which had earlier carried a charge of tension and anticipation, now seemed to breathe a gentle, cleansing sigh over the land. Sarah and Tom stood side by side, their eyes scanning the dark horizon that bordered the Walmart parking lot. They shared a look of cautious hope, wondering if their efforts had truly calmed the spirits or merely appeased them temporarily. The weight of their responsibility lingered heavily in the silence between them. As the last of the community members began to disperse, heading towards the dimly lit safety of their cars, a cold breeze swept across the parking lot, rustling through the leaves and whispering secrets only the night could understand. Sarah shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. The breeze seemed to carry a faint, almost imperceptible whisper, a voice so soft it was almost lost in the wind. "Thank you, but remember." The words trailed off, leaving an echo in Sarah's mind. She turned to Tom, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and intrigue. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom, looking equally unsettled, nodded slowly. "I heard it. It sounded like a warning, or maybe a promise." They looked back at the now empty ritual site, the candles extinguished, the sacred objects packed away, leaving no trace of the ceremony except for the flattened grass and a lingering sense of the supernatural. The Walmart stood in the background, its massive structure casting a long shadow over the land, as if standing watch over the secrets it housed. As they prepared to leave, a sudden movement at the edge of the parking lot caught Sarah's attention. She squinted into the darkness, her heart pounding with a familiar dread. There, just beyond the reach of the streetlights, she could see a small figure standing alone. It was the childlike apparition, the one that had first drawn her into the depths of the Walmart's haunted past. The figure stood still, its outline blurry and indistinct. Then, slowly, it raised one hand and waved, a silent, solemn gesture that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. The message was clear: while they might have achieved some peace tonight, the story was far from over. The spirits were still watching, still waiting, and still tied to the land on which the Walmart stood. Sarah felt a resolve firming within her, the night's events only deepening her commitment to uncovering all the layers of the haunted ground. She knew this brief peace might be just a prelude to more discoveries, more challenges. She glanced at Tom, who seemed to understand her unspoken thoughts. "We'll keep watching," he said quietly, his voice firm with determination. "And we'll be ready." As they walked back to the store, the first light of dawn began to touch the sky, casting a